Hi there, Jayco owners. Today on your 2020 Jayco Redhawk, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to replace the rear sway bar with one from Roadmaster. And this is what our sway bar looks like when it's installed. This is going to be a direct replacement for your factory sway bar. You'll get a brand new bar, new bushings, caps, end links, as well as most of the hardware. You will be reusing the cap bolts here, but for the rest of it, it's all going to be new. So this is going to be a great upgrade if you're dealing with sway on your motorhome. If you've got some heavy rocking whenever like a semi passes by, heavy crosswinds, or just during evasive maneuvers and turning, you can increase the size and power of your sway bar by going with a Roadmaster one here. This is going to be made of a stronger, much larger diameter material that's going to give us a lot more anti-sway properties than our factory one did. It's also great if you're having any issues with clunks or noises and you find that you've got some bad end links and stuff like that. You know, you could just get factory parts and fix it, or while it's broken, you could go ahead and just replace it and go with something better. The way our sway bar works is the bar itself is attached to the axle here on our vehicle, and the ends that come out here have links that go up and attach to the frame. So our wheels here, they're always going to be sitting on the ground as you're traveling. You know, your wheels are going to be touching the ground, but your suspension rests on top of those wheels. So as you have those heavy crosswinds and stuff, or hit potholes, boom, you know, you hit a little pothole. As that happens here, it's going to transfer into your suspension, and they do kind of are independent from one another, just kind of supported by your leaf springs and your front suspension. So as the frame here moves closer and further away to the axle, for example, let's say we got a heavy crosswind that's coming in here on our passenger side and it blows us over towards the driver's side. What's going to happen is our axle is going to be on the road here, but that crosswind's going to hit and our body's going to start to tilt this way. That's going to bring the frame closer to the axle over on this side, which is going to push down here on our sway bar. The other side, though, is actually lifting up away from the axle. So the arm here that's attached over there is going to pull up. So our sway bar arms here are kind of doing this. It's a twisting motion that's occurring on the sway bar. And the sway bar doesn't want to twist. This is a pretty big boy here. And if it tries to go out of its natural state, it's going to want to spring back into its position. And it's going to help keep your motorhome upright. It's going to absorb a lot of the side-to-side movement that you get from, again, that potholes, crosswinds, and things like that. It's also going to reduce the amount of oscillations you have, because as you start to sway to one side, you're going to level out and then it's going to rock back. But you have that momentum there, so it's probably going to go past center, and you're going to kind of go back and forth like this until you settle out. With a bigger, more robust sway bar like this, it's going to minimize how far it goes and how many back and forth you have, if you even have any at all. In addition to making your motorhome safer and more manageable to drive, it is going to increase your energy while driving your motorhome, because you're not having to fight so hard to maintain lane and keep everything in control. Some additional components to further assist in taming your big motorhome would be a front sway bar from Roadmaster. We have bigger ones as well to help match the larger ones here. Sumo springs from etrailer are also great options that can add additional dampening to your suspension and also help with sway and support a little bit of weight. And a steering stabilizer is also recommended. Now those really don't help much with sway, but in the event that you do hit like a pothole or something and it jerks the wheel real hard to the left or to the right, that steering stabilizer has a shock absorber on it to dampen how much of those forces transfer into the wheel, as well as a spring to help pull that steering wheel back to center. And all those components work together to give you just the safest driving experience. You'll be more confident with all those components, and when you reach your destination, you're just going to have a lot more energy because you weren't working so hard to go from point A to point B. We'll begin our installation here underneath our vehicle. We're going to remove our factory sway bar. Now, when you're doing this at home, you may want to lift your vehicle up a little bit to give yourself some more room underneath. You can use like your leveling jacks if you've got those to help lift it up, but you do want to make sure you put a jack stand underneath the frame to support the weight. We're working on our lift here, holding our motorhome up. You can do this on the ground in your driveway. Again, if you want to lift it for more room, you can do so, but you could do it right there on the ground as long as you can fit underneath there and maneuver around. So we're going to start by taking off the factory sway bar here. This is the factory one here at the rear. That's our rear axle. It's connected on the ends to the factory end links. We're going to go ahead and remove the end links here from the sway bar. We're going to use a 15mm socket to remove the nut here on bottom. And that'll just zip right off of there. You'll have a bushing as well as a washer. That'll just pull off of there. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. We got both of those off. Now sometimes your sway bar will pivot downward, but more often than not it's clamped so tight that it's still going to kind of stay in this position. Oh, look at that. It did pivot down, so if you can pivot it down, just go ahead and pivot it down out of your way so we can get the entire end link off of there. If you follow the end link up, there's going to be like a banjo head at the top of it with a bolt that runs through it through the side. So we're just going to zip this out. The nut's going to hold by itself because it's got a little flange on it that goes into a little tab on the frame, so you should be able to just zip it right out of there. And that'll just drop down. We're going to grab the nut that probably fell on the other side. Oh no, it's actually clipped into place, so the nut's exactly where it needs to be for us. So we're going to just take our end link with the bolt and we're going to set it aside. Make sure you keep your hardware. And we'll remove the one over on the other side the same way. So now we can remove the entire sway bar. It's just kind of pivots here in the bushing clamps. You have two bushing clamps, one on each side, and each bushing clamp has two bolts that hold it in place. Now when you go to remove this factory sway bar here, it's not light. It's not as heavy as the larger, more robust sway bar we're going to be putting on, but it's still fairly heavy. So you'll want to get yourself into a position where you can support it while we're taking it off. I'm going to be using a combination of my shoulder here and my hands to remove this side. And we're going to use a 13mm socket to remove these two bolts. Alright, we've got those off of there. Go ahead and keep support on it. I like to use, again, my shoulder, something like that, to help support it. And then we can go over to the other side and get those fasteners removed. And be prepared, because when you take that last one out, the whole bar is going to be ready to come down. And we're just going to gently kind of rest it down. And then we'll set it off to the side. We're also going to make sure we take our bushing caps and stuff off of there, but we will get new bushings and stuff with our new sway bar. So here we have our new sway bar from Roadmaster sitting next to the factory sway bar. You can see here that the one from Roadmaster is a significantly thicker diameter than our factory one here. We'll kind of pivot it up so you can kind of see them side by side. So there's a whole lot more bar here with the Roadmaster one. And that's going to make a big difference in how much sway it's able to reduce and prevent from happening. The more weight you add to your motorhome and things like that, just the worse it's going to get. So this will help tame it and make your motorhome ride a lot smoother. You won't have so much sway, so you don't have to fight so hard. So you can really just get a good look at the two sizes between the two. And then the nuts that were left behind from when we took off our end link, you want to just pull those out of there. Just kind of, I like to rock it back and forth and push downward, and that kind of just snaps it out of the little groove that was holding it in place. Make sure you remove the one on the other side as well. We're now going to go ahead and install our end link. It is just a straight bar, so you can use either side. It really doesn't matter. It's just straight. The bolts that come in our kit, you're going to put a flat washer on it. This is going to go up where our old factory sway bar was. You'll push the bolt through your end link, place another flat washer on it, then slide your bolt through the frame in the same hole where your factory end link was attached, and then follow that up with another flat washer and an nylon locking nut. And for now, we just want to leave this loose, so that way it'll easily pivot around. And then we're gonna get the one on the other side loosely installed the same way here. Prepare the bushings that come in our kit. If the caps are on, you can just pull the caps off. You can see that our bushings are split bushings, so they'll slide over the ends pretty easily. You do get some lubricant in your kit that we're gonna be using to lubricate the inside of our bushing before installing it onto our sway bar. Now you may want to wear latex gloves when using this. Some customers have reported that it irritates their skin. I've not noticed any issues myself, but you know your body better than anybody, so if you feel like you need to take the precaution, go ahead. And we're just going to thoroughly coat the full inside of our bushing here. Make sure we get both sides on the inside all the way coated. And then what I like to do after I've got the inside all the way coated, if I got any excess that's on my finger, I'll just take and smear that here on the outside. Now you really don't want a lot here on the outside, but just a little bit of excess that's on your finger is okay, and it can help to just reduce any kind of squeaks or noises that could potentially occur. So after you've got it all lubed up, we're gonna just apply it to our sway bar here. We don't want to do it in the center. We kind of want to move off to the middle little chute here that's going off towards the outside of the vehicle. So just open that up and slide it right on there. We're going to go ahead and lube up the other one now and slide it in the same location on the opposite side of our sway bar. Now that we've got them both lubricated, this is where the option is up to you. The instructions want you to install the bushings right back up to where we took the other ones off. So you'd slide your little caps on here and attach your bolts to it. It does come with some Loctite to use on those bolts, but me personally, I find it easier to install it to the end links first, and then you can just pivot it up. That way kind of the weight's being partially held by our end links here. Because you can kind of just set this on the ground and pivot the end link up to make it line up there. So I prefer to do it like that. Also check your Roadmaster sticker. On our Roadmaster sticker facing the appropriate direction when we lift it up there. So we know when it sits it's going to be like this. So now I'm just going to raise it into position. We left our end links loose. Now I already prepared this here. This is just the same concoction of hardware as above. It's the same size bolt with a flat washer. It goes through the end link, another flat washer, and we can slide our bar right on there. And then we're going to follow that up with another flat washer and an nylon locking nut. Grab our other washer, nylon locking nut, and then we'll head over to the other side where we've got the hardware also prepared over here. Everything's loose, so you can kind of just tip it out and slide it in. Place on your flat washer and then your nut. And then this way you can kind of have half the weight is supported there, so you can just kind of pivot it up. And I find it easier that way. But if you want to do it the other way, like the instructions say, and then do the second, that's up to you. So we're going to get the Loctite now so we can put those other pieces on. That's also why I like doing it this way, because it's just more to hold up there. And then I want you to put Loctite on. And I like to prepare my hardware before I lift this up there, just to have less things to kind of do all at the same time. So these are the factory bolts that we removed from that location. You get some washers in your kit, smaller washers. Those will slide onto these bolts. This is the Loctite that comes in your kit. Just kind of break the top off and then apply it to the bolt. And I'm going to do this for each one so that way they're ready to go when I need them here in just a moment. All right, so we're pretty much ready to lift it up. You can go ahead and take your caps. We're going to rotate those to where they hopefully don't fall off of there when we're trying to lift this up. They do like to fall off of there quite a bit when you're moving this around. So if one falls off, On the other side, don't worry about it. You can let it hit the ground and just pick it up. I'm gonna grab 2 bolts, because I want to try to get one side fully bolted on. We're just gonna pivot it up into position here and thread our bolts right back into the factory nut that we'd removed it from. Sometimes they get a little stiff. You can grab just the socket and spin it by hand. This way you're not putting any kind of tool on it that's gonna potentially cross thread it if you're not in there perfectly straight, but you're not gonna be able to cross thread it just by turning the socket by hand, but you'll get a little bit more power, and usually that's enough to be able to get it started in there. So this one's started, got each one started. I'm gonna grab my bolts for the other side. We're gonna pivot that one up and get those started. After you've got each one started, we can then go back with our 13mm socket and just run those down. So now that we've got our clamps attached up here, our end links over here, if you look at them, they're not going to be very straight, and our sway bar here is not very straight either. So the factory hole here at the top really is not going to be the most suitable hole. So we are going to be just popping this bolt out so we can figure out the best alignment for our sway bar, and then drilling our own hole to give us the best alignment possible. I like putting that bolt up there though, again, just to be able to kind of rock the sway bar up. For me, it's a whole lot easier to lift this sway bar up doing it that method. And all we got to do now is just reach up here and loosen up this nut that we just had hand tight. Same thing on the other side, loosen those up. And then you can just pull them right back out of there, and it should pivot on our clamps that we had installed. I already got the other side removed, so we can see there now that it'll pivot. So ideally, we want our sway bar here to be parallel to the ground. So be about right like that. That's pretty close to parallel right there. After you've got that parallel, the next thing you would want to do is you'd want to make your sway bar end link straight up and down. So we're going to take our sway bar here, we're going to hold it to where it's parallel, take our end link, hold it till it's up against the side of the frame at a spot that keeps it roughly parallel, and it looks like that's probably going to put us at about right here. Once you've got your spot, go ahead and just mark it. And once you've got your spot marked, then we can go ahead and drill it out. Once you've got the hole drilled, you can then take your bolts, the big ones with the washer on it, slide it through. We're going to use the same combination we did before, so it'll be bolt, washer, through the end link, washer, through the hole that we just drilled, washer, and then nylon locking nut. And then after I get this one installed, I like to snug it down so that way it holds our bar tightly in place. So when I go to line up the other one to make that one straight up and down, and I mark my hole, I know it's going to be fairly consistent because this bar is not going to want to move around because we've got everything kind of tightened up here. So we're going to use our 3/4 inch socket and wrench to just snug up this side. So now that we got that side snugged up, we're just going to hold this side up here, mark it, and drill the hole and repeat over here. Now that we've got everything snugged down, at this point, we're just going to, I guess we should maybe adjust that. Once I got the other side drilled out and tightened down, we can now go back and torque all of our hardware to the specifications outlined in our instructions. And that completes our installation of Roadmaster's Rear Sway Bar on our 2020 Jayco Redhawk.